Don't look at me like that. Persona 5's hyper-stylish pause menu tells you, the protagonist's hand having slapped the screen and the options menu popping up. But we can't help but look at it. Persona 5's so gorgeously constructed that you're mesmerized by every pixel of its craftsmanship flair. It's impossible to look away. Don't look at me like that indeed. Just take a look at this. Stylishly dressed, pressed into cover, you're sliding closer and closer to the enemy, leaping at them, pulling their mask off, gooey stuff drops to the floor, ambushes popping out. You're already in battle with the upper hand. Then with the enemies dispatched, you take off at a gentle run between your opposing teammates and the XP screen. Then you slow down the jog and you're right back in the dungeon where you were. It's insane, it's beautiful. And it's not just in the dungeons that are like this, moving between areas with their brief loading screens of commuters, tapping your train pass even to exit the station. Every damn menu in the game. It's almost overwhelming how beautiful everything is. Look up the word slick in the dictionary, what do you find? Uh-oh, it's the Persona 5 protagonist reaching out of the book with his hand saying, don't look at me like that. Oh, and the soundtrack too ties it all together with some of the best and catchiest songs ever.
Who am I? Am I not unique? Maybe I'm not here at all.
Look, let's dial it back for a second. It'd be easy to just go off on one about how great every aspect of this game is. It's a game that's wholly aware of how it presents itself and the importance of not only having fantastic, slick systems that I just spoke about, but systems that mechanically all slot together just so to keep the whole thing moving at rapid fire pace. The thing is, hours pass when you're playing Persona 5 without you even realizing it. You're hypnotized by the sheer joy of looping between each of these lovely feeling pieces of game, each with their own distinct flavor of pleasure. There's no compromise to any part of it.
Damn brat! I'll sue!
Persona 5 steps away from the smaller towns and communities of the previous settings, this time throwing you right into the thick of Tokyo itself. And the same goes for the protagonist too, codenamed Joker after the gang gets together. Having been stitched up for assault defending a woman on the street from a harasser, he now has a criminal record and has been forced to move from his hometown, joining a school in Tokyo, and having to live in the attic of his new fake dad's coffee and curry shop. Don't worry, he's a family friend, and yes, coffee and curry is an actual thing in Japan. It's better than you would think. Give it a try. It's on your way to your new school that you bump into Ryuji, the typical headstrong tough guy with a heart of gold. And yes, he is one of the best boys. Both of you end up accidentally coming across a huge castle where the school should be, which is a bit weird. You've stumbled onto a palace, a product of the other world that lies parallel to our own, where twisted desires of particularly nasty individuals reshape the world. It's all part of some kind of shared psyche. The anguish of the punished students within, victims of abuse, are made manifest. Persona 5's story is dark from the get-go, but not in an edgy way. It's quite mature in the way it does it. The character writing is standout, as you probably expect from a Persona game. These all feel like real young adults with their own individual problems and personalities. It's just that this time, some of the dark sides of humanity that the group's forced to go up against surpass those in previous entries. Things in this city are just denser, more complicated. Using these newfound persona powers, the ragtag team of teen friends are able to not only enter into people's palaces, but also to steal their hearts. These hearts are represented by treasure, which is linked to their soul. Stealing it basically steals their ambitions and causes them to confess their crimes to the real world because they no longer have the ambition to cope with what they've done. It's a bit complicated, but it makes sense. Essentially, the game's dungeons are a series of elaborate mind heists through some of the worst minds Tokyo has to offer. Each palace is designed to match the themes of the story and its owner. And what's really important to get across is it's not just set dressing either, but the way you work through and interact with the palaces, with the dungeons, is all pinned down by the themes that the dungeon is about. One standout is a casino that highlights how the justice system can often be stacked against people who can't game that same system. It feels like not just a struggle through a dungeon, it is a struggle through a dungeon, but it's also against the casino systems themselves. Each palace feels completely unique and stands out in its own way. Wanting to see who you'll need to take on next and what form their palace will take will keep pushing you on to the next challenge.
Good work. Keep it up.
Show me your true form!
First move.
Serves you right. Do it.
The dungeons in Persona 5 feel more robust than ever. These are some of the most well-designed dungeons in any JRPG ever, in fact. They don't feel like lightly decorated corridors or maps, but fully constructed and built out environments. The first palace takes the form of a castle, sees you scaling, spiraling towers, leaping across chandeliers, looking for hidey holes and secrets that contain treasures, all while avoiding and ambushing patrolling shadow knights. There's a huge amount of interactivity to the areas, like slinking from cover to cover in the game's brand new stealth system, interacting with objects, to say jumping on top of a shelf and wiggling through a hidden and optional vent. The battle system incorporates all of the best elements from the rest of the series, literally to a degree, as nuclear and psychic attributes are back from the first two games. That's not all, thankfully full-on demon enemies and negotiations are back too. Don't fret though, this version of negotiations is the simplest and easiest to understand yet. Once enemies are knocked down from a critical hit or a weakness, you can hold them up, choosing either to use an all-out attack, Persona veterans will be familiar with what that is, or you can negotiate with them, yay. You can squeeze them for items or cash, or try to forge a contract with them to welcome the persona into your heart. Just as the negotiations have been kind of simplified since the last time we had them in Persona 2, the Velvet Room's Persona fusion functions have been given a fresh coat of paint too. It's never been easier to see which combinations will yield what and exactly which skills will be inherited. You'll be fusing like nobody's business. But the tweaks to the battle systems don't just pile new stuff on, they also improve the battle flow immensely. Knocking an enemy down gives you a bonus attack, or one more, as you'd expect from other games in the series, except now you can baton touch with an ally. This allows you to move a one more attack from one party member to the other, chaining together attacks all the enemies are weak against, swiftly finishing them off with an all-out attack once they're down. Couple this, the baton touch, with the ability to just tap a button to highlight an enemy's weak spot, providing you've already discovered it of course, and encounters can start to drop like flies as you whiz through the palaces. Persona 5 has a distinctive rhythm that's hard to shake, and only really begins to wobble when you encounter roadblock enemies that have no weaknesses to finesse, and you have to kind of hit your head against. But still, even these can be rumbled with careful attention to critical hit rates, and by getting the jump on them in ambushes. The baton touch itself is a low-level benefit of having someone as your confidant. This is the new version of social links that were introduced in the third game and have since become a hallmark of the series. Now even the non-party confidants can feed back into the game in a much more direct way than before. Some, for instance, allow you to retry failed negotiations, or perhaps highlight the best choices to take in a negotiation. Another grants you access to some very useful accessories for dungeon exploration. Another one lets you skive off in classes to perhaps read a book or secretly craft lockpicks under your desk. A lot of these you'll need to come across on your own by exploring the districts of Tokyo.
Just had to rain.
Tokyo in Persona 5 is built out into specific focused areas as opposed to being an open world, but they've used that opportunity to dive in and make these areas feel super detailed and lived in, from stooped salarymen making their way to work to the quiet streets of Yongenja at night and the street corner gossipers. You can unlock more locations as you go on and take the train between them, coming across more shops and quirky characters as you do. Underneath Tokyo lies Mementos, a palace of the shared consciousness. You see, only the worst of the worst get their own specific domain. It's a labyrinth of spiraling subway tunnels that you explore by way of Morgana transforming into a Totoro-esque cat bus. Mementos plays home to some side quests, and it's a perfect place to level up and find some treasures. But be warned, don't be fooled by thinking Mementos is optional. As the game goes on, you are required to reach the bottom at some point. While this can be sped through late in the game, it's best played dipping into a bit at a time. As is just about every facet of Persona 5. It doesn't really feel like segmented chunks of a game. It's all in the blend, just like Sojiro's coffee, that makes the flavor of Persona 5 truly begin to gush out.
Traffic's not moving at all. You're taking the train starting tomorrow. So, how was it? The school, I mean. Think you can manage?
Those who have been eagerly awaiting the English localization of Persona 5 haven't waited in vain. The localization is actually pretty good. It doesn't pull any punches. It does a great job at getting the spirit of the Japanese version across, and that's not an easy thing to do in a localization. For the most part, the dub's pretty spot on too. Special shoutouts go to Ryuji, Max Mittelman, and Sojiro Jameson Price, who grew on me a lot throughout the course of the game. With that said, some of the smaller roles do feel like they were recorded much more quickly, as you probably would expect, and the audio mix itself does leave a little bit to be desired in places. But overall, it's really well done, and in keeping with the Japanese version. Even if you're not so hot on it, the Japanese voiceover will be available as free DLC to keep everyone happy. With that said, the Japanese voice acting, also excellent.
Shut up! It's your fault that
How dare you speak that way to Mr. Kamoshida? There's not much leeway left for you, you know?
he's the one that provoked me.
Do you really want to be expelled?
It's no secret that Persona 5 has undergone a whole lot of delays, but there's no question that every second of Persona 5 has been in development, has been spent tweaking, perfecting, refining, resulting in what may very well be the perfect distilled manifestation of not only what a great Persona game can be, but any JRPG or any game. The bar has been changed upwards, it's been raised, the bar has been raised. Gripes you might have had with JRPGs, utterly addressed. It's just a really good game. It's a landmark moment. You can't help but compare everything else to Persona 5. And I don't just mean other games. I mean anything else. I mean going out for coffee with someone. It's not as good as in Persona 5. You know what? JRPGs will never be the same again.